So we are continuing with our sermon series on the book of Judges called His Eyes. Basically, that means like everyone did right in his own eyes, but they're never far from his eyes, from God's eyes. So the whole idea behind Judges is that it's like a toilet bowl, right? You can see there's a whole theme, right? And it's just swirling around and it's just swirling around the drain, and it doesn't get any better or anything like that, just constantly getting worse. And this swirl, this cycle is basically like there's peace and relative safety, and then Israel begins to sin. And the sin looks different. We're talking about a kind of a different form of sin today. But the sin starts happening, and then they become oppressed by someone or something, and they call out to God, and God sends a judge or a chieftain, a deliverer to them, and brings them out of that situation, leads them to peace, and then the cycle just all starts happening again, right? And it's just that cycle down, cycle down, cycle down. So that's what's going on. We see that right at the top. We're in chapter 3 of Judges today, and that's all we have. We got like 3 chapters next week. But we have just chapter 3 today, and there's this judge named Othniel. We don't really know much about this situation, but it kind of shows you that cycle of the judges and all of those things. And the problem is that as this cycles down, it gets us to the last verse in the book of Judges. They said, in the days they had no king, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Like, that's the last verse. That's not a cheery verse in the book of Judges. And we're going to talk a little bit about the end. I'm going to ruin the ending of all of that for you this week. But that's kind of what this is, what we're all getting to, is that this point here. But we meet Ehud today. But before we meet him, we see that this Moabite king and the Moabites have taken over a city in Jerusalem, not a city, a city in their area over there, and that city is called the City of Palms. The front row is not allowed to answer. Does anyone know what the City of Palms is? Oh, I usually told Gloria she's not allowed to answer either. Like all these things, like Jericho. You know, Joshua in the Battle of Jericho. After Joshua in the Battle of Jericho, they held Jericho for about 18 years. You know, 18 years, that's a pretty long time, but it's not a huge amount of time. That's about how much time until the next eclipse. Did you see where the next path is going to be? It's going to be right here. You guys ready for it in the next 22 years? Or are all of you going to be here? like that's the next, I think it's, what was it, 2045? I'll be 52 like when that. Oh, I know. Like just the whole thing. What? 62. I'm just showing off, you know. Like there's nothing like doing math in front of a crowd. Like that's right in front here. But that's about how long, you know, it's a good amount of time, but it's not a long time. They lose Jericho, that big battle, right? And they're like, oh no, we're being oppressed, and they cry out to God for a deliverer, and he gives Ehud, however you want to pronounce it. Ehud over them, and he's left-handed. So that means we got to talk about you lefties for a little bit. Who's left-handed? We're going to make fun of you today. All right, good job. So there's like 5, 6, like all around here. All right, over there, you guys write weird like this, right? Like there's like, yeah, you're like all that. No, they don't do that. They just get their whole thing. So, you lefties, how is it living in a right-handed world? It's all right. Like it's all you know. Like all that. Like it's over there because the world is right-handed. It just is. And you lefties, you've gotten the short end of the stick, but like a bunch of the times. And I have the receipts. I looked into all of this and so I think the funniest one that shows that it's a right-handed world. What's another name for correct? Another word for correct? Right. Yeah. like that shows it really quick. And some of you are like, yeah, whatever. That's just a little coincidence. That doesn't actually mean anything. Well, the etymology for the word left in English, left means weak. Oh man, right? Like that's over there. So some of you can remember back this far, and this may have happened to some of you that are left-handed. What did they used to do to left-handed kids in school? Yeah, make them right in the other way. Like that's not nice. I remember my grandparents' generation, they would like tie their hands behind their back to learn how to do this. I have a friend that was born in 1988, and even though we're all like cool with left-handedness now, him being born in 1988 was trained how to write in his right hand. Like all of that, they're like, oh, don't let the devil hold your left hand, right? Like be part of the right-handed club. His handwriting is atrocious. Don't worry about him. He's like pretty high up at ExxonMobil. He's doing just fine. Right? Like over there, he lives over in Houston with all that stuff, right? So like that's what we have there. This made me laugh. Like the being left-handed in the Victorian era starter pack. Like that's so. In the Latin phrase for left, the etymology in Latin, do you know where we get the word left from? Sinister. Good job. Is it up there? No, good man. Extra star for you today. Sinister. They get left-handed. Did you have that because of Don? Yes. Sinister. Sinister and left is the same in Latin. Like that's over there. Like, and we still have this today. What's a left-handed compliment? Nothing good, right? Like that's it's back and forth. Like it's unflattering, right? Left-handed people have historically been considered unlucky and even malicious. If you look back in like medieval art, like the Middle Ages art, usually the devil and evil spirits are always on the left side of the painting, and Christ and everything good is on the right side of the painting. Like this is, like you lefties live in a right-handed world, right? The Soviet Union decided that it was completely thing, and they tried to get rid of left-handedness. They tried to just completely, utterly destroy it. And it's just funny. Because like this whole concept of left-handedness is like the left hand is always bad. And some of you are like, well, maybe that's just new. Well, even in Middle Eastern cultures, they use their left hand to deal with their business, right? And so that hand is your crappy hand. And so like that's just the way it is. And that this idea here shows us what's going on in the story, and we need to have that idea of how we consider left-handedness. Sorry, everybody. It's left-handed. Don, I'm sorry, left-handed. Like you're just letting Satan have that left hand, like dominance. But we got to do that in order to understand this story all the better. Because we get into this thing about Ehud, and it says the Israelites, they cried out to the Lord, and he gave them a deliverer. Ehud, a left-handed man. Now, whenever you see in the scripture stuff, and you can tell it's important because it's highlighted, And so whenever you see something that's so out there about somebody, that then you know that it is important and you should be paying attention to it. Now, left-handed means something else here too. It also in Hebrew means like a bound right hand. So another thing that we understood about this one is that he could be left-handed because he has a crippled right hand. Still nothing good, right? All over here. Then you get, and he was son of Gera the Benjaminite. And this made me laugh when I saw it. I think it plays into it because these Bible writers are usually pretty clever. Benjamin, do you know what another meaning for Benjamin is? What, like over there? It's son of my right hand. Yeah. Yeah, so you've heard that before. Yeah, son of my right hand. So it's like slaps in the face over and over again. So he's left-handed and feeling small. And he went to go pay tribute to this Eglon, the king in Moab. Right? He goes over there. And he goes in there and he's able to talk with this king and get things. He's like, I have a gift for you. And he goes in there, and when Jan was reading the story, they just let him in. He's the leader of another country, another nation, another tribe, right? And he just able to go in and he gives the gifts. And he's like, send all your attendants away. Why did they send all the attendants away from the king? It's because they know, either because he's got a crippled right hand or he's just left hand in general. Again, sorry, Don. Is that he can't do anything to him. He's already too weak. Right? He's already outside of any goodness. He's already outside. This guy he's no threat to us. He's no threat to anything, right? Like that is what is going on in this. And what happens? We're going to read it again because it's so much fun. It made me laugh because I looked over at Avery. Coley put it out, Avery, because Avery was like, as soon as you started reading the gross stuff, which is right there, she's like, what? And it's like, looking like, oh, she's left-handed too? Yeah. So it was funny, like looking at it all and all that stuff. So like he gets close to the king, and the king thinks this guy's worthless because of his left-handedness or the crippled right hand, right? And he gets close to him, and he reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly. I told you this is the most judgy of judges reading we could possibly have. And even the handle sank in after the blade, bowels discharged. Yum, right? And he didn't pull the sword out, and the fat closed in over it. I take that personally. That's what this story is unbelievable, right? They're not looking for any of this because he is left-handed. He's not a threat to them at all. And I think this is how God always delivers his people. He delivers them in this way that we aren't expecting, because we, just like this king of Moab, are always looking for power, right? We're always looking for rightness. We're always looking for the correctness. We don't want that left-handed kingdom. All right, we got to talk about something real fast. I debated about doing this while I was practicing, and we're gonna talk about it. I'm going to use a lot of right and left language, right hand and left hand language here. I am not talking about our current political divide. All right? I am not. Do not read into that. And if I get an email saying that I am, I'll know who is worshiping their 24-hour news network. All right? It's just the case. That's just the left hand. Because God is using the weakness of the left side in order to accomplish his positions. God is one that fundamentally uses that left, like that Ehud left hand, right? That we always want to have the right. We want to have the power and the glory and all these things, and that we start feeling like oppressed and downtrodden. We're like, I need a big, powerful leader to overcome all these things, and yet God sends Ehud. One that no one would think anything of at all. Because we see that all of this they do what is right in their own eyes is just power seeking. That's all it is. Remember in chapter 1 of Judges, it said that when the power of the tribes of Joseph, that's Israel, that's who they were at that time, they began to press people into forced labor. They began to push people into slavery. And that's not who they are. They celebrate Passover every year to remember that they once were slaves. That Egypt held over them, and God told them over and over again, do not be like Egypt. Do not be Egyptian. And yet, when they get a little bit of that taste of power, they're like, some slaves would be nice right now. We need to be like Egypt. We need to be like Egypt, right? That's the whole thing. They come and take over there because that power is insatiable, and we all love it. We all love, we want to be correct. We want to be right, right? We want the powers of the world, and we hide our weaknesses. Listen, I have so many weaknesses about me. I know you guys are like, no, you don't. We don't see them. Whatever. Listen, I've got incredible amounts of pride that just run through my veins. And you know how you can tell? It's because I get up here and talk at least once a week to you guys and tell you what you should do, right? Like that's it's just the nature of the gig, right? I have a microphone on. Like, this isn't humbleness, right? Oh, it's for the live stream. Sure. And so that you definitely can hear me, right? We got pride coming through all of this just over there. I get conceited so easily with all of this. And I think that idea is that how we want power. We want that right hand of dominance. Right? We push aside the weakness. We hide them. We want to do what is right in our own eyes, in our right hand. And I think what we see, and I'm going to ruin the end of the book of Judges for you, because this is the point of Judges, is that by them constantly seeking for power, it takes them down this road where they end up killing themselves. The end of Judges is like it. When we were going through the book of Judges, it made, like, this isn't funny. He's going to watch this later, but Mick made me laugh when we were going through Judges, because it's the first time he's ever read through it. And he goes, I read it to the end, and he was angry. Like, why are we even discussing this book? Because it's disgusting at the end. Like, they kill themselves. And that's what our searches for power bring onto us. It causes us to want to dominate and dominate. We're constantly looking for the correct thing. It's like, are you good enough? Are you good enough? All right, over there. And we will start culling and getting rid of all of those that we don't want anymore. You're not good enough for us. And it's all for the sake of my correctness, my power. And it'll come and infect even in here. I think we're all old enough to know of certain groups where that has happened. That's my main complaint with HOAs. It's just power-seeking individuals wanting to rule the neighborhood, right? But we've seen it in churches. We have seen it in government. We've seen it in our own lives too. How our desire to be right and perfect has often even affected our friendships. Like that, this is what happened to Jesus. Like, the Pharisees killed Jesus. Now, the Pharisees, like, I like the Bible, but I haven't memorized the first 5 books of the Bible like the Bible, right? Like, I love the Bible, but these guys had it memorized. Imagine that. Like, Kyler and I were talking about the books of the Bible and having them memorized, and I have them almost memorized, where I can just go through them. That's just the books, right? Like, did you guys have them memorized? I saw a lot of eyes do this. Like, that's, with all of that. Like, that's, yeah, we don't like to talk about our weaknesses, do we? But these guys had it all. If there was anyone that knew and loved the commandments, they called the law, they called the Torah, like this yoke that they would put on in their lives. Like, that's how they viewed it. And yet, when their power began to be questioned because of Jesus, the Messiah, came along, they're like, off with his head. We don't care about the 5th commandment anymore. Yeah, we don't care about any of this anymore. Like, get rid of them. Like, that's, like, how often have I had those same feelings, right? Like, and we see that that's just that power of that right hand. The power of that right hand, but Jesus comes in that left hand of Ehud. Jesus comes in that. Like, you look at how Jesus was born. He wasn't born inside the temple in Jerusalem. No, he was born in some small stable. And it wasn't Herod the king who came and worshiped at his feet. It was shepherds. And I guarantee, you know what I found out this week? I found out where the phrase, throw out the baby with the bathwater, came from. Do you guys know where that came from? That's back when you guys, maybe not you, used to only bathe like once or twice a year. And the kid and the kids would always bathe last, and the water would be so dirty they could lose the child in the water. Cool, right? And that's what people that are in society, shepherds are outside of society, and those were the first ones. That's that left hand of Ehud right there. That's that left hand that comes in there. And you look at Jesus, he's always bending down to the lepers and those that are out on downtrodden, those on the outside, the weak, right? All of time parts of Peter's life where we're making fun of him is where he's trying to be powerful. And yet Jesus, he took all that power and didn't rise up, but instead he was risen on the cross, dying for all of us. And in that moment, joining on the cross with all of our weaknesses, all the things we're ashamed of, so that in his resurrection, he could pull us out of that. And so that we can boast in what Jesus has done. We can boast in our weaknesses because we know that they have been conquered. When I think of anyone about power, I think about the Apostle Paul. Paul was this guy, he was just like one of these Pharisees. And where the Pharisees killed Jesus, he was like, whew, we need to kill his followers too. And they began breathing murderous threats all over the countryside. And yet there was that one day when he was on the Damascus Road experience. And Jesus showed up in front of him. And Jesus is like, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? He's like, I don't know who you are, Lord. I don't know what's going on. And it says that he was blinded by that. Now, he regained his vision later. And we're going into Bible study here for a second. He regained it, and it was like scales fell off of his eyes. But we think that Paul actually had a lasting eye issue. Maybe from that, maybe for something other. There's cues. He says, see what large letters I'm writing to you. And it's not like the length of the letter. It's like, look at this. I'm writing like a kindergartner. You know, like I see with these large letters I'm writing. And in the midst of that, I think this is what Paul is talking about. He goes, or these surpassing great revelations, therefore, in order to keep me from being conceited, Lord knows I understand that. Keep me conceited, right? Keep me from being conceited. I was given a thorn in my flesh. We think that's that eye thing. A messenger from the evil one to torment me. 3 times I pleaded, Lord, take this away from me. And then our verse. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in your weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly in my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest in me. What does that look like today? What does that look like? Because so often we want to dominate society. And we still hear that. Like the churches, like we talk about, like, oh, like they're persecuting us. We need to raise up leaders who will show them how strong we are. We also see, like I have heard church officials, I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, that have gone like, we need to start winning again. We're going to start winning for all this stuff. But the thing is, as a pastor, the biggest thing that I have seen has been people that have come up in their weakest, most outside times, and someone random, someone part of the body of Christ, someone that's outside of all of that came to them, and they went, I went through this too. I went in this, and suddenly, when your pain and their pain is joined together, there's almost like a resurrection that happens in the midst of that. In the midst of those pains, you're like, I'm not alone in this. And that's what we see, where we always want power. We always want to recoil when people are causing persecution and hardships on us. Paul says, that's why, for Christ's sake, I delight in all of this. I delight in those insults. I delight in the weakness. I delight in hardships, in persecution, in difficulties. Because when I'm weak, when I'm walking through those valleys of the shadows of death, I know that on the cross, Christ also went through those. And that he joined himself in his weakness and hurts and pains and wounds with mine in the midst of those hardships and brought me out. That is Ehud. That is Ehud. He shouldn't have been in charge, and yet he was. This is the story of pretty much every judge except Samson. Samson has a different story. So even in our own weaknesses and all of that, we can see that my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in your weakness. I've seen that in my life. I've seen that in what this church has done. Like, I need to end this, but I'm going to keep talking for a couple more minutes. Look at what the daycare is. What I think is special about that daycare, there's two things. When we did that project, there's two things. The first one was, I remember it was like a light switch. The day that this congregation realized that caregivers, often of Alzheimer's patients, especially when they're spouses, often die before the patient themselves because they're so stressed out. I remember this congregation grabbed a hold of that idea, and I did not hear any worry about the project after that. Like they saw the weakness and they wanted to join up with it. And the second thing after that is there's something about this congregation that they said, I heard so little about, well, are we going to get members from this? Right? Right, Ed? I've heard so little about that because I think this project was never about the power. This was always about the weakness. That when that place is providing respite care for the people that are able to come there, so those people may live longer and have fuller lives and be able to be in the house longer, then it is operating at 100% capacity. And if we get anyone off of that, then great. I think it's leading in that weakness. Now, I'll have to say, and I don't know why this is, but I'm looking out over here, and there's kids squirming. Jacob's yelling in the back. We got these people over here. There's a bunch of faces that I'm telling these stories. You have no idea what I'm talking about because you have all come after all that stuff. I don't know why you're here, but I do know that God's grace is sufficient for you because in our weakness, he makes us strong. And I think that's good news. And we'll end right there. Let's please rise for a blessing. God, we thank you that you love us and that you are always with us. Lord, when we become conceited and prideful in the actions that we do, Lord, help us to see the Ehuds, your left-handed ways of coming into the world. Where, Lord, you use the weakness to confound the strong. Lord, when we think that strength will solve all of our problems, help us to see how you work in your kingdom, where you work through all of those small weaknesses and small things to bring about goodness into the world. Thank you, Jesus. Amen. See you next song.